Monza, a track that strikes fear into many who drive it. With the majority of the lap at wide open throttle, danger strikes at every corner. This week, we kick off the second season of the 2021 series in the Grand Prix Legends, and you can catch every lap of the season right here on the Global Sim Racing channel. Hi, I'm Chad Irvine. Here with me in the booth today is Ryan Walker. Our director is the legendary Sean Ambrose, and he's using cameras provided by Dougie Beard. The speed is high here at Monza, and it always provides some great racing. To learn more about it, let's take a look at this week's track guide.
Welcome to Monza. This track has a major place in racing history, not just for the legendary races, names, and cars that have been here, but because it was the third purpose-built car racing circuit in the world. It's often discussed and reverenced among fans, and especially by Italians, who have nicknamed it the Temple of Speed. In fact, the Ferrari fans here are so famous for their devotion that they have been dubbed the Tifosi and never fail to show up in droves. While the real world offers only 3 feasible layouts to race on due to safety, in iRacing, the inclusion of the oval and the lack of safety concerns gives it a stunning 9 versions drivers can choose from. The modern GP layout is of course the most well known, with its long history of hosting the Italian Grand Prix. But the oval and combined circuits allow those who thirst for more speed to satiate that craving with its insanely high banking. Indeed, incredible velocities are a staple of just about every version you can race here. Draft battles are not uncommon, no matter which car you're racing. But the inclusion of the chicanes makes using an outbraking maneuver a much more tricky way of overtaking. The circuit is notorious for drivers getting tangled up with each other while running side by side in these slow and cumbersome corners. In fact, one of the greatest dangers for drivers is the first few laps when the field is still clumped together and attempting to navigate them 2 and 3 wide. While there are other modern circuits with high-speed straights, the fact that Monza sits inside the Royal Park just north of Milan and is still tightly lined with trees heightens the sense of speed here. All in all, Monza is unmatched in its history, thrills, and great racing. Its significance in motorsports history and culture is sure to be unchallenged for years.
Well, it's a track, as we mentioned, one known for its high speed. We're not running the first chicane in today's layout, but Ryan, why don't you tell us a little bit more about this track and what we're expecting to see today?
Yeah, absolutely. Monza, it's one of my favourite tracks in the iRacing service. It's 6.213 miles in length, and it's got an amazing 13 turns, and the layout today we'll be using is the layout with no first chicane, so expect plenty of draft battles on that home straight, and maybe some hairy moments as well in that long right-hander heading up to that first chicane. And Monza is famous for hosting the Formula 1 Italian Grand Prix, but also it's hosted sports car racing in the past, GT racing, and junior Formula racing as well, such as GP2 and GP3. And today it will be hosted to round 1 of the new Grand Prix Legends series season today, and boy, I can't wait for it. And the best passing opportunities are going to be the Curva Grande and the Lesmos, but the danger zones could be that oval section, the banking, or the chicanes, or even the parabolica. So something for these drivers rather to keep in mind, and it should be a great start to the season, and one that I can't wait for.
It's definitely a track that you're wide open, as I mentioned, for a lot of the lap. That high banking oval section, not in use anymore, but it's always something that's a ton of fun to drive no matter what the car is. But let's take a look real quick. This is the first week of this 2021 Season 2, as we mentioned, but we do have some championships to look at from last season as well. Mick Claridge, with 433 points, dominated the majority of the season from the UK, and then Topi Courtniemi, 362 points, came up in second place. Then Ovi Trengrade, 358 points, a very close battle there for second spot on the podium. Then Rob Olenek with 322 points, so just a little bit out of that third spot. And then Michel Dudnan with 308 points, wrapping up the top 5 in the F1 championship.
Yep, absolutely. And the F2 championship, that was taken by Finland's Janne Lehmann on 169 points, and he took that comfortably over second place, or joint second place, Dave Cohen and Robert Plumley, with Emmanuel Pereira from France rounding at the top 3 on 110 points, with Andrew N from the United States in fourth from 108 points and rounded out that top five, and having a pretty consistent season and a good season as well was Roland Wallback on 91 points. So that was your top five for the F2 Championship last season, and it'll be interesting to see who will be beating contenders for that championship this season.
Yeah, and a lot of those guys that we saw in the top five there, both in the F1 and the F1 or F2 championships, a lot of them are familiar faces returning once again this season, so I'm looking forward to that. We also do have our Nations Cup from last season as well, something that I have not really seen in many seasons or series before, but they do it here, and it's definitely an interesting take on the competition. Let's take a look at those point standings, where the United Kingdom was on top with 513 points. The United States just 26 points behind them, and then Finland with 426, and then France and Norway wrapping up the top five in the Nations Cup as well. And take a look at our race details here. If you want to actually, Ryan, why don't you talk about the race details a little bit?
Yep, absolutely. So this is round one of the new Grand Prix Legends series today, as like I mentioned just at the start of the broadcast. And the race length for today will be 14 laps with a standing start. So getting these cars off the line can be tricky, and clutch control seems to be the main aim with these cars getting off the line. And the setup is open as always, so you are free to make any changes that you want to do so. And the incident limit is 17x, which will be a penalty, and if you get to 25x, you will be disqualified from the race. So something for these drivers to keep in mind, and especially around this track as well.
Yeah, and these cars are very difficult to drive. It's not a downforce car. It doesn't have a bunch of wings and plates and everything to kind of keep the car planted. It's really a challenging car, especially when you are having your hands full both on the oval and then you also with these very high speed sections into multiple slow chicanes, the Lesmos, of course, some of the more famous corners on the Parabolica. You really need to get a good run out of there as well, just to keep momentum up going up into the oval section. So you'll start out, if I remember, you start out going around the oval, then loop back around to the road course section, and then you loop back in off the Parabolica back into the oval once again to finish up the lap. And it's always very interesting watching guys do their best to keep momentum up and kind of work their way around such a tricky course.
Yep, as at the moment in qualifying, it's currently McLaren's on the pole position at the moment with a 222.6, but Topi Cortinemi is second on the grid with 222.9, so relatively close up at the front, and Rob Olnick seems to be a little bit further back in third.
Yeah, a lot of those guys, as we mentioned earlier, were at the top of the timing, or at the top of the points at the end of last season. Ove Trengere just went to third on the charts with 222.993, so still 0.3 of a second off Claridge, but doing a great job setting fast times and staying competitive, especially at a race here where it's a long race. Every lap here is 10 kilometers, so you're going to have to spend a lot of time. It might only be 12 laps, but man, it's going to be a tricky race just getting everything, 14 laps. It's going to be tricky just keeping the car planted for that long, especially, tires breaking down, fuel making the car lighter, just trying to hold on. Looks like a couple of guys, top five still the same. A lot of guys really seeming to struggle. Some guys towards the back, not putting some of their best times, especially from some of the guys that we would expect to be at the top of the timing.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems to be Monza is one of those tracks, especially the layout we're using today. It seems to be a very, very tricky track for some people to get around. And I think with this layout we're using, it's not always about who's the quickest or being quick. It's more just surviving, especially that oval section, because that oval section it can go horribly wrong, especially when you're in a big pack.
Yeah, one thing you'll notice through a lot of these tricky corners, especially going into places like the Lesmos and the Parabolica, the braking zones are very, very long. The car, if you kind of get on the brakes too hard, the back end's going to want to come around on you, and it's going to be very difficult for some of these drivers um, to put in, clean laps and kind of keep the car under them, especially when you're trying to battle side by side through some of these sweeping corners here at Monza. So not much of a shake-up here when it comes to top of the charts. Still Claridge, Amy, Brabo, then Trent Grade, and Dave Price. All of those guys have turned both of their qualifying laps, so just doing their best to get acclimated to the conditions. Wind right now is and we are actually going to step away as qualifying starts to wrap up, but we'll be right back in a couple of moments for the start of the Grand Prix Legends season here in 2021 Season 2.